There is a great riddle given to us by the mystic seer Almin. Sound is a clock, frequency is time. The following transmission was inspired by the contemplation of this riddle. Time travel has always held a deep fascination in the minds and fantasies of men. Yet the way in which it has been envisioned, attempted, and at times achieved has been within the strictures of the eggshell incubation chamber of linear time. That is, his attempt at time travel has mirrored the limitation of his perception within the matrix of a confined, linear, cyclic form of experience. This method of time travel, then, that he has attempted and at times achieved, has been to travel, as it were, from one house or structure, confined structure, to another. These houses can be called structures of belief systems, which have held what man has favored as order in place, but has actually held back his spiritual growth and development. But one way that he has used to travel through time has been to be as a resident within the guest houses of belief system, from one to the next, alternating, never quite able to inhabit them all at once. Yet these guest houses have not been hospitable to the traveler. They have required that he leave a part of himself behind within each house, like a ghost or remnant of the past that trails behind him and depletes life force energy, as it has required that he maintain a type of stagnant neutrality in order to remain the observer within these guest houses. He has pandered to the dream of the belief system. He has prostituted away part of his life force energy in order to sightsee along these tourist strongholds of linear construction. In truth, we now have revealed to us, through our spiritual maturity, the ability to time travel in an entirely different way. In a way that does not enforce our small will upon life, which in the broadest definition is a form of black magic, of control and manipulation. In our spiritual maturity, as we have surrendered to transcending the eggshell of linear time, we are able to inhabit the entire pranic tube, the fully extended pranic tube, which extends down below the perineum, down below the feet, into the ground, and extends above the head. When one inhabits fully the pranic tube in the resurrected state, one is in all times at once. One inhabits the original hour. The original hour is timeless and time. The original hour is the innocence of timelessness. Timelessness is experienced through surrender. Innocence is experienced through timelessness. The original hour has all qualities of all times within it. It is like a clock. That is, it has within it different rates of frequency, different speeds of vibration. One is able to inhabit all time by being here now, thus there is nowhere to go in time travel. Travel becomes that of presencing all realms and all times. by the ability to maintain awareness and presence in multiple waveforms, in multiple speeds and rates of frequency at once. One might ask, how can one maintain multiple rates and speeds of frequency at once without creating extreme dissonance or chaos? Well, there are ways in which the tones of the clock are all able to vibrate together without causing chaotic dissonance. And it is important here to mark that there are two different kinds of dissonance that we must distinguish between. One form of dissonance being that which holds on with attachment to a note held beyond its time. This causes distortion within humankind's grid or template of life. One of the reasons why the human grid has been so distorted is because of his attachment to his desires. Though his desires for meaning and for purpose may in themselves be innocent, it is his attachment to these desires which has caused him to be literally stuck in time, bound as if by sticky ropes that attach him to the pedestals and checkpoints of imagined structured belief systems and reference points that deny him the perception of his vastness. Because of being latched on to these sticky points of reference, he has been like one who is crucified or roped and pulled in all directions at once, while at the same time pulling against them. This is the dysfunctional dissonance. But dissonance in itself, that is, notes which vibrate in a high level of turbulence with one another. For example, the ratio between intervals, the Pythagorean ratio between intervals. If we look at such intervals as the perfect fifth or the octave, which vibrate respectively at a ratio of 3 to 2 or 1 to 1, we can see that they are harmonics which promote states of bliss and expansion, often used in different sound healing mechanisms. They are considered harmonious. Likewise, the third is also considered harmonious, but the third is actually more turbulent than the fifth because there is a little bit more discrepancy between the ratio, which causes sort of a ricocheting effect back and forth, or more of a tremulous vibration. Or most notably, this can be observed, for example, in a diminished seventh or in the interval of a second, in which there is extreme turbulence in the ratio between the notes because of the way they vibrate against each other. The dissonance in itself, however, can be used to break up stagnancy. It can be used to tremble and enliven different areas of awareness. It can be used as a type of compression of focus or a compression of time, to sort of go through this pinhole focus point of reality into a new, more expanded reality. So in combination with harmony, dissonance plays an extremely important role. What makes the difference between functional dissonance and dysfunctional dissonance is that functional dissonance is not experienced with attachment. The focus is not experienced with a enforced will upon one's exterior or a fixed focus, because it's a fixed focus which glues us to reference points or shrinks our experience of ourselves into a constricted form. Compression of focus does not require that we have constriction. It is just a peculiarity of vision, our attachments to our desires as our awareness moves through space time itself being defined as the movement of awareness through space, as we surrender to infinite intent, we find that time itself is but the movement of the voice of the infinite. It is the sung song of the infinite, the awareness of the infinite through sound, sight through sound and sound through sight, so that one might see through voice and thus give back to the infinite one's unique experience or contribution of perspective. Whereas dysfunctional dissonance only plays a part in that which tries to hold on to a fixed reference point or has an attachment within its desire that then moves through time in a way that keeps it in a linear fashion or a cyclic fashion, and thus traps it in cycle and repeat or karma. So these two distinctions between dysfunctional dissonance, which holds on through attachment, and surrendered but skillful focused dissonance is an important distinction to maintain in this discussion of time as frequency. There are examples or illustrations in the natural world which can illustrate for us different aspects of time within the original hour. Now, mankind in his linear incubation chamber has experienced these as linear sequence or as cyclic repeating alternations rather than experiencing them all at once, because for a while our evolution was highly focused, and in fact it was rather a fixed focus on what we are not. The incubation chamber served in showing us what we are not by our observation being in the mirror of a reflective surface which bounced back light and frequency off of its surface and thus distorted it. Mirrors can only mirror back what we are not, being either reversed or upside down. So in the seed phase of time, the seed represents linear time. It represents when it is helpful to see what we are not in order to have the pressure or the discontent to transcend and in fact master the tool of linear time and progress to the next phase of inclusiveness. Consciousness manifests as a tyrant when it has not yet been mastered. Thus, in our infancy, we manifested opposition. We manifested an incubation chamber through which we grew by opposition. We strengthened what we opposed and used this as a growth mechanism. That which is contained within an egg can only experience itself through a cyclic fashion, one stage at a time. Thus, the seasons and the phases of development became associated with mourning and grief and loss, because we thought that we were actually losing something as we went from one thing to another, but it was only because the peculiarity of our vision at that stage of development could only behold one aspect at a time. We have now transcended beyond that, and we realize that all phases exist simultaneously: the seed, the blossom, and the fruit. But in thinking that the seed was all there was, we constantly had this feeling as though we were about to blossom, we were about to bud and finally break forth, but we never actually did, because our only experience of seed, blossom, and fruit was within the cyclic manner of the linear seed. Linear time, however, does serve the purpose of showing us what we are not and providing an intense examination of the details. The blossom phase of time represents exponential time. It is represented by the illustration of dropping a pebble into a pond which constantly expands in concentric rings. Exponential time has starburst growth at a very fast rate because exponential time corresponds to transmutation. Transmutation corresponds to alchemy. Thus, the master knows that the only way to change his environment is by changing within. Alchemy is the combination of two dissimilar elements. In combining them, a leveraging occurs. This leveraging occurs within, which then shifts our experience of our reality without. Thus, it is a way to reveal the real environment. The environment is something that is created through the microphone of the heart by what we alchemize within, what we leverage within. Magic can be said to be the fabric of existence because it is the unfolding of infinite intent. Magic is the song of the infinite unfolding, and we unveil it through these perceptual shifts within. In exponential time or blossoming, this is self-evident, and we master what before was our imprisonment now becomes our tool. What was our tyrant now becomes our tool. The blossoming aspect of time is the aspect which enlivens or gives reality to all other aspects of time. Why so? Because the blossoming happens through the heart. It is where the crossover point of the Mobius strip ignites. It is where inner and outer space meet. It is where the androgynous poet proclaims. The inner and the outer, the masculine and the feminine, they meet in the crossover point that is a fluid twist in the Mobius strip. They have no separate reality. In fact, they flow one into the other. The inner impulse alchemically reacting to the outer stimulus, which deepens the inner impulse, which then brings forth more outer stimulus. They are one and the same in perpetual alchemical reaction. Thus, the heart is the manifesting force of all life form, because the power of all life comes from the heart of the mother. Any creation that is a true creation, that is, which truly unveils infinite intent, must come from the heart, because that is where the crossover point of ignition is between inner and outer space. So the blossom is that which is exponentially ever deeper and ever reaching. The blossoms are each in themselves, every petal is a Mobius strip in itself. It is ever reaching. It is endless, and our growth within the blossom is exponential. The third quality within this illustration is the fruit. The fruit contains both our incubation, which is the seed, and our maturation, which is the flesh of embodiment. Embodiment cannot exist without the one and the many, without the contradiction or the paradox of the one and the many. And it is in the integration of the one and the many that we come into our maturation, and we are able to include all that was in our incubation chamber even as we transcend it. Embodiment is the paradox of the one and the many, and that paradox that is found in the heart, in the blossom, is then made manifest in the fruit, in the flesh. All three of these are illustrations of aspects of the original hour. The original hour in all its aspects is frequency, manifesting at different rates and in different forms. Vibration, the sound of the one voice of the infinite. Time is the tool by which the infinite comes to know itself. We have blamed time and space as the biggest prisoner of our reality, as the biggest obstacle or limitation of what we have defined as the human condition. And yet, paradoxically, time is actually the most prominent tool by which embodiment of the infinite evolves. Because consciousness of the infinite, the objective, if there can be said to be an objective to embodiment, the purpose and the yearning of embodiment is to be able to experience itself within time, to have awareness of its experience, and yet not to be trapped by that awareness. So to be in timeless time, to experience all time at once, and yet to maintain a memory of it or some sort of experience of it. Because if we were only in timelessness, we would not be aware of what is happening. Awareness moving through space is the definition of time. Thus, time is the voice of the infinite, seeking itself, touching itself, vibrating with itself through space. Space being the amphitheater, the eardrum, the resonator of infinite intent. When we were within what we felt was the captured eggshell of linear time, when the seed phase of our infancy and our incubation, the embryo experienced the different subpersonalities and the different aspects of time as being somewhat mutually exclusive to one another or mutually hostile to one another. But that was simply the fixed observation of the many. When we see that the one and the many, the observer and the observed, are in fluid, alchemical, perpetual interaction, there is no such thing as mutual exclusivity, because the differentiation that is provided through the unique individuation is in harmony, is in resonance with infinite intent. And we are no longer in a state of self-reflection where the echo bounces off the wall of our caves and we think that that is all there is. Rather, the membrane becomes pure eardrum, that which receives, hears, transmits, and broadcasts the proclamation of the infinite all at once. We are beings of living, seeing sound, of a voice that sees, and of a sight that sings. And when in the innocence of the original hour we inhabit, we fully presence the full pranic tube, we are in all time and yet able to experience the unique qualities that the seed, the blossom, and the fruit each contribute to this self-tasting experience. And when they all combine, the muse of the heart, through surrender, awards us with the ever-blossoming, ever-leafing, ever-fruiting staff. The branch that is awarded to the pilgrim by the muse of surrendered inspiration is the branch that is ever-leafing, ever-blossoming, and ever-fruiting simultaneously. It is the branch which leads the traveler into new spaces of unknown, in which to sing out and resound within the intent of the infinite, the awareness of the infinite, sounding itself in resonance. This staff of the pilgrim can also correspond to what happens when the Ida and the Pingala, the feminine and masculine serpent, are merged in the pranic tube. This corresponds also to something which has recently been revealed through the oracular odes that I've had the privilege of transmitting for some of our sisters and brothers. And this correspondence has to do with the HPA axis. The HPA axis is the functioning of the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal glands. They all work together, and they have much to do with our experience of time and our response to time, signaling us when to eat, when to sleep, how to feel, when to feel aroused, when to feel at ease. And these glandular systems, as we evolve beyond the incubation shell of the egg into the blossoming time and into the experience of the original hour of our innocence, the glandular neuroendocrine system, which signals us to the experiences of time, has to upgrade. Previously, the HPA axis existed in a dual fashion, basically in the form of duality. That is, it was like the two pillars at the entrance to the garden. When we felt banished from the garden, when we felt that we were not at home, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal system set themselves up as gateways or as a dual entryway system, so that it appeared that in order to enter the garden that we had to go through a gate or through an entryway that was supported by duality, by two pillars, like the pillars of Boaz and Joachim at the entrance to the Temple of Solomon. These two pillars, when we create the reality of Godhood through the attitudes of resurrection, these two pillars merge with the central axis of our reality and merge with the spinal channel, the pranic channel, and become one, just like the Ida and the Pingala merge and become one. When this happens, instead of seeing the entryway to the mother's garden as an external gate, when they merge, we become the gate through our presencing of the axis, sort of like the center that is everywhere and the circumference that is nowhere. Through our presence, our time travel, which is in itself a standing waveform of being here now, we open the gate through our central axis. Well, there is no gate at this point. It seems as though there is no way to enter the garden. That is because we are the entrance to the garden, because we exist within the garden. We are the seed, the blossom, and the fruit of the garden, and the babe or the child who is the mouthpiece and the oracle of the mother herself. So this also can be illustrated as we create the reality of Godhood through our attitudes. The reality of Godhood can be illustrated as a pyramid, a three-dimensional reality, with its foundation being divine compassion, gratitude, and praise, forming the 3 points of the two-dimensional triangle, because in order to create any reality, there must be 3 points. And then surrendered trust being the attitude that forms the capstone or the top of the pyramid. Now, in order for this pyramid to ascend fully to resurrect fully, that is, from the rotating cycle of life, death, and ascension into the simultaneous reality of resurrection, it must become a Sothic pyramid. It must elongate. So as we start to build this structure, we can see that the 2 pillars of the HPA axis of the neuroendocrine system existed side by side on both sides of the central axis in the pyramid. As the pyramid is elongated and stretched, then those 2 dual pillars, those dual adrenal systems, those dual kidneys, which ignite the spark of life in the meridians, the body, become one. They hormonally become one. And this is a state of deep peace, which embodies and fully presences the moment of the original hour in eternal innocence. When this occurs, something within the center of the pyramid itself ignites. It has been said by ancient mystery schools that the I is in the center of the pyramid. The I as in the E-Y-E, the faculty of vision that sees. When the neuroendocrine system upgrades into resurrection in this new Godhood reality, the I within the pyramid ignites. That is, the perspective of Godhood earns its wings, or comes to know its wings. So the I is then able to fly, to soar. Because of this foundational pyramid, the I now has wings and is able to move through time while standing still. This is the image of the I that has wings within the pyramid. As this neuroendocrine upgrade occurs, the spine becomes the flowering serpent staff. All the vertebrae become open portals of paradox, and the spine with the fused Ida and Pingala, with the fused HPA axis, becomes like a living, fragrant time clock that blossoms. Every blossom is a vibrating symphony of the orgasmic infinite harmonics. Sound is a clock and frequency is time. We then profuse, emit, transmit the pheromones and the hormones of time through the flowering serpent staff. The brain and the spine undergo this massive hormonal neuroendocrine upgrade and becomes the flowering serpent staff. That staff or branch which we previously only thought we could hold out in front of ourselves to find our way into new unknown areas of unexplored oceanic self. We now become that staff. We house the staff within our spine and our brain. And much of this is done by healing the amygdala. The amygdala in the brain, the reptilian part of the brain, has often been blamed as being outmoded, as belonging only to the dinosaurs, as being only the function of the outmoded caveman who runs from the saber-toothed tiger and functions on the fight, flight, and freeze hormonal reaction. But not so. The reptilian brain is actually key to our evolution into resurrection, because it is that aspect of the brain which is a pure receptacle. When it is cleared of the memory of nightmare, when it is cleared of the programs of nightmare, nightmare is stored in the amygdala, trauma is stored in the amygdala. When it is cleared of those layers which are created, as it were, by the layers of linear time, when we think that that is all there is, then our trauma stacks upon itself and it becomes like fossilized encrustations of bad dreams. When we clear that by manifesting a real environment with the heart, the amygdala becomes instead that which hears infinite's voice. It becomes the seat of the serpent brain, the seat of the oracle, The serpent brain becomes a pure receiver, transmitter, and broadcaster of the infinite. It must be able to hear the song of the infinite in order to contribute to the song. And that hearing and singing becomes simultaneously as the inner babe is at deep peace within rapture of the eternal time. And this is where we can see that we are both the eye of the storm and the storm itself. We are that open octave peace, that open octave feeling of harmony or of silence at the center of the storm, and we are also the turbulence, the dissonance, which creates contrast and diversity and uniqueness. We are all of that. And we become the doorway to everything through this final transformation. We are the doorway to the garden of Mother's lucid delight. We are the amphitheater. We are the mouthpiece. We are that which articulates the voice of the infinite. We are that which articulates time. And we become the clock. Now, how do we wield this clock in perfectly pure, automatic, inspired interaction? Well, we must know that the secrets of frequency lie both in the appearances and in what is behind the appearances. And what is behind all appearances is the nothingness that is often referred to as the 0 point. It is that great song of silence, that silence from whence all sound comes. One of the largest lessons that I learned over the past year during my healing journey, being in the hospital multiple times and dealing with very severe fatigue, is that in that nothingness is where our power arises. That in fact there is no such thing as personal power which enforces its will upon life, because that is just the imagined dream of the child who feels abandoned from its mother. That the life force that is real, in fact, is very difficult to perceive when we are in this state of 0 point. It is almost impossible to see energy or to see life force at all in the nothingness. And yet it arises, as it were, almost of no source of its own, because the nothingness is the source. Of no source and yet for all purpose. Because when we are in surrender to infinite intent, we hear only the song of the infinite, therefore we can only broadcast the song of the infinite. And that power which empowers us is the voice of the mother, is the voice that arises out of the stillness through that divine discontent in the mother's heart that is embodied in divine compassion. In the sigil of divine compassion, we have the numerical alchemy of 15, the 7 and the 8 being in a state of sort of divine disequilibrium, which produces the yearning of the infinite. It is not a yearning of attachment. It is the sort of desireless desire, which desires simply to know itself. That is the root of all desire. That is the root of mankind's desire. How can we lift mankind out of the distorted grid of warped harmonics, of sticky attached harmonics? By living this embodiment, by being fully present in the mother's ever-blossoming garden, by hearing the voice of the infinite, and knowing that that is all there is arising out of the nothingness. When we first encounter this nothingness, it can almost be frightening. That is why it is so helpful to have the attitudes of the reality of Godhood, the divine compassion, gratitude, praise, and surrendered trust. Without these attitudes, we would have no form of contributing, no form of navigating. They make up the merkabic vessel of our navigation, by which we are able to steer our way, by which we are able to be the way showers, by letting our joy and inspiration be our guide through this timeless time, through this nothingness that gives yield to all song. If we look individually for a moment at these attitudes really are like foundational notes that form the voice of the mother and the experience of the voice and the body with which to feel and know the voice. For the body is the resonant word made flesh. The body is the vehicle of the voice. It is a resonator, a broadcaster, a transmitter. Embodiment is the embodiment of voice. Voice and frequency create the form of our reality, create the fruit of our existence and of our mastery in Godhood. If we look at gratitude, gratitude is that which has the principle of gravity. It brings us down into our roots. It activates the chakras beneath the soles of our feet. It ignites the chakras beneath the soles of our feet. This reminds me of a phrase in the prophecies of Merlin in which he describes the maiden of the apocalypse, she who unveils, as walking with a sulphurous step that has with it a double flame. This is the flame of one who walks in reverence. One who walks in reverence is constantly at home, is constantly rooted in the earth and in the presence of the one self. It is the wonderful gravity of appreciation. The gravitational waves which are being discovered in our universe by astronomers are actually the waves of gratitude. Gratitude measures abundance. Gratitude measures bounty without confining it. How does it measure bounty without confining it? By appreciating it. By appreciation. When we measure by appreciation, we promote flourishing. Instead of measuring for limitation and constriction, we're measuring abundance and producing more abundance by appreciating it. Gratitude yields abundance by measuring our bounty, by appreciating our bounty. Gravity is the appreciation of our bounty. It's balanced by the attitude of praise, which is levity or levitational wave. It is that which is in a state of wondrous praise, arms uplifted, eyes uplifted to the heavens, a state of rapturous surprise and wonder at the unfoldment of life. It uplifts the heart. It lifts perception into higher, beyond paradigms, beyond even the confines of new paradigms. It takes us up and beyond. And then between these two, as a balancing force in the heart, is the divine compassion, which is in equilibrium. Ironically, it's in the equilibrium of levity and gravity that we also find that divine disequilibrium of yearning. So the heart, again, is that blossoming force. It's where the Mobius strip crosses over and ignites. The blossoming is that which gives life to both seed and fruit. It is the divine compassion which recognizes all as the self. And it is that yearning to ever discover, embrace, taste, touch, experience, and proclaim the self. So you have the gravitational waves of gratitude, the levitational waves of praise, and then the waves of divine compassion are spherical. They're rather concentric. Rather like the bursting of a star or the structure of a cell. They embody all. They embody the many within the one. The paradox. And divine compassion is very much about the paradox. The paradox where the inner poet receives the impulses of inner space and the stimulus of outer space, and both are mutually inspiring. It is where the muse resides. And then the capstone of our beautiful, miraculous vehicle is the surrendered trust, by which we know that all is perfect. And in surrender, we experience that timeless innocence of the original hour. So we are entering into the enterless and exitless existence, the birthless and deathless existence, the paradox that is eternal, where we are the door to everything. The two become reunited through our awareness of the serpent, the blossoming serpent staff. In hearing the infinite's voice, our spine flowers, and the babe in the garden becomes the peaceful mouthpiece. The navel is no longer throwing out cords of needy umbilicus. It's no longer trying to suck resources from its environment, because an umbilical cord that is attached to external resources is not required when we realize that the source of our existence is our sustenance, and that we are inseparable from that source. Thus, the umbilicus becomes one of centered self-sustenance, which flowers, and the navel becomes that which constantly yields forth in surrendered trust the abundance. With gratitude, we walk. We walk, the chakras beneath our feet ignite. It is the walk of reverence upon which all ground is holy. Through our presence, our feet touching the earth stimulates that inspiration, stimulates that perpetual homecoming. And the praise, the perpetual praise, perpetually lifts us up so that we are ever experiencing newness within this ancient journey, this ancient endless journey, this journey of giving thanks to the measure of abundance, and then the divine compassion, which is recognizing all as the self, that spherical, explosive, orgasmic inclusiveness of the ignited high heart, and the surrendered trust, which is like the capstone to our new energy supply. It's like the golden capstone on top of the pyramid that enhances the reality created by the triangle and makes it three-dimensional, makes it a three-dimensional pyramid, and enhances the inspiration, enhances, because through our attitudes we enhance the quality of the journey. And in surrendered trust, we can do this, we can be this every day with perfect assuredness of perpetual victory. For there is only the proclamation of embodiment. That is the seed, the blossom, and the fruit. It is the word made flesh. It is the one and the many. It is the voice that sees and the sight that sings. Embodiment is the flesh of consciousness. It is the oracle, the mouthpiece and the ear, receiving and transmitting the voice of the infinite. And that voice, too, is the body. We are formless form because we have the structure of Godhood, and yet the I within the Godhood is able to fly anywhere by being in that standing waveform. We are of endless vibrational capacity. We are in form through the emphasis of hope, which is the song of the heart that is singing in glad expectation. We now are able to maintain our form, not through tension, which clusters awareness, but through the emphasis of hope, which is perpetually open-hearted to the intimacy of this alchemical combustion. The kidneys and the adrenals are united into the singular staff of the flowering spine, the spine of the oracle, the serpent brain, which hears and sings forth the voice of infinite intent. Sound is a clock and frequency is time. We unite the clock with the awareness of the 0 point, of the timelessness and the frequencylessness, which is beyond the manifestation device of the clock.